Honest J. Nowak. Oh yeah. A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to HJN, Flying with the Foam. Now I might as well say, there's a long stretch ahead, but there are certainly no lackings of any ideas that I could possibly get. Because there are so many blasters in my collection right now. It seems ridiculous at first, but eventually it'll help to make sense. I feel like it's gonna go at some point to the point where I might need to make a second part of this at some point in the future. But until that happens, right now, 632. That's the number of the episode right now. And today's blaster, which also counts as today's subject, is gonna be the Alpha Strike Fossa. And now, I might as well say that on a streak where there have been so many blasters out there that had kickstarted some new lineups and franchises, amongst all of Hasbro's products, the Alpha Strike series certainly held its own, being that it was a much more cheap knockoff sort of alternative to the more expensive regimen of blasters out there that we have gotten in the past decade or so. There have been a lot of competitors out there like Dart Zone, Buzzbee, Adventure Force, and some others here and there that have all managed to cash in on their own share of success. But for the Nerf Alpha Strike series, I feel like that this is a pretty good way of catching on to this sort of glimpse of how some companies can actually succeed by bringing cheaper products into the marketplace. And honestly, the Fossa here, Flight CS10, yeah, I can never forget about that just by looking at the side of it. But of course, I am definitely keeping my commitment on how these blasters must have their own trademarks settled once and for all. And Flight would not necessarily be appropriate for a blaster of this type. It's the same sort of problem that I've had with others out there, like the Tiger, the Spinneret, and the many others out there, because at first Alpha Strike was giving us a nice promising outlook on the new lineup that would give us a more cheaper variant of getting through the marketplace, so that way it could accommodate more families of all sorts, because not everybody can have their own collection with hundreds of blasters that are at least 25, 55 bucks a piece, because it can pretty much be a huge crush on your wallet or bank account of any sorts. But being that this is actually going to be called the Flight, just simply because that's this little thing that Hasbro's been doing for a while, that almost leads me wondering, how is anyone out there getting away with this? I mean, quality control is really one thing, but considering how this is an Alpha Strike blaster, zoological things out there happen to be the more fitting purpose of the blaster's names themselves. Because they all started with blaster names like the Fang, the Tiger, Wolf, Lynx. Basically more zoology sort of names out there. Names that would refer to animals, names that would refer to parts of an animal's body or anatomy. And this in turn, just by calling it the Flight and not something that probably would relate to an animal in flight like an eagle or a falcon or something of that sort, it almost leaves me wondering who is even in charge of that stuff anymore. So from this point on, consider this just completely removed. Like, I'm just going to hold it like this for the most part. But I will say that the Fossa CS10, being an Alpha Strike blaster, it may have some really cheap qualities to it, like the lack of screws and bolts. I mean, you could take a look all over the blaster and find that there are none at all. Yeah, not even on this side. And ironically, well, there's also this little thing that goes around, kind of a minor complaint, but the Nerf logo is, of course, embossed and colored in black, just to let you know this is a Nerf blaster, and the other side does not. It's in the same shade of yellow as the majority of the blaster's body as a whole, and then of course there's the nice bright orange out there, because it's another big trope that Nerf seems to do with just about all of their blasters. And there's also some black on this one. Yellow, black, and orange. How could you go wrong with a color combo like this? I don't really see too much wrong with this blaster, but again, it's cheap qualities, and most of the key features that you can identify within this is the fact that, well, this is actually the first iteration of a motorized Alpha Strike blaster so far. So with that in mind, I suppose that there were a couple things that they were trying to do here just to lessen the cost of production, and therefore lessen the cost of the blaster itself, because it takes 4 AA batteries just to power this, and it has this nice little cover in it that just snaps shut, but you have to pull back on it to release and then flip it over to reveal the compartment for all 4 of them. So this way you can power this thing on. I will say for sure that the Fossa's motorized flywheels themselves are probably in similar quality to that of most other flywheel blasters out there, especially from the earlier days. The quality of flywheel blasters, especially from the years of 2008 up until around 2013, they weren't really the best. So blasters like the Raven, the Hailfire, and a few others here and there, they weren't necessarily top of the line when it came to flywheel function and motorized capabilities of all sorts, but I will say that this one seems to catch on with that, but it also seems to do pretty well at keeping its stability in check, and also its it's fairly loud in a way, so I wouldn't really recommend having a blaster like this around if you were in an apartment like setting or somewhere where you have a lot of people who usually rest a lot during the day. So having the Fossa around in its motorized function, trying to play around with it in the house or somewhere like that, in an apartment or wherever you usually are, probably wouldn't really be the best option. Other than that though, the 10-round magazine with the black color scheme on it, which is technically another piece of exclusivity, because there are a lot of magazines that we've been getting recently, well, in the past few years, that have their own color scheme specifically attributed to the blaster that they come with. We have a black 10-dart clip right here that came with the Fossa, and honestly though, for a motorized blaster like this, a 10-round magazine and little to no pieces of hardware that you can use, apart from, well, maybe just a couple screws that you might be able to find in certain areas, because how else would you be able to hold something like this together? And there are a few that I almost missed. There's one down here, there's one up here, and well, not much there anyways. So overall, the Fossa CS10 from the Alpha Strike series, or Flight CS10, for an easy $10 bill, I'd say that this is a good pick-me-up. For an Alpha Strike blaster, it seems to do okay in most ways possible, and the Fossa certainly does hold its own, even though it is in fact a much more cheaper iteration of a motorized blaster that Hasbro has been doing very professional work at. As professional as possible by this point. So I will say for sure that the Fossa might have a lot of good features in it, maybe some not so good features, but they're easily carried over, as the good features usually stick around. But I will say that with all the things that I'm going to be doing later on, it's no surprise that I'm now going to be continuing forward here in Flying with the Foam, and also ensuring that I'm going to be getting as much material as possible before I finally disclose the rest of HJN in its full glory for the rest of the whole season. So if you want to see more go down on my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.